For the past few years, we've seen a significant rise of documentary films. What something was once considered as a plain, boring, informational film is now becoming more and more popular across generations. This is thanks to streaming platforms like Netflix that made this medium much more accessible to wider audiences. But I don't think that's the only reason for this growth. Documentaries are a very unique way of telling a story. Unlike in movies, there's really no script or actors, but there is instead a real story of a real person. And this story unfolds in front of the camera in a way that is unpredictable for the filmmaker and the viewer. Unpredictable, but somehow relatable. We see a person sharing their vulnerabilities while facing the conflicts of their lives, and we relate to that. It doesn't matter if they're going through something completely different from whatever we experience in our lives. In the end, we've all gone through something. We've all had our battles, struggles, and defeats, and we connect to that. We get immersed into this person's story and we feel like we're part of it. And for me, that's what makes documentaries so powerful. They're a reminder of how complex, tragic, and weird people's lives can be.
There it is! Let's go get it! Come on! Let's go get it! Get in the car, get in the car, get in the car! Come on, come on, come on!
But not all of the documentaries manage to achieve that. There's a variety of factors that contribute to the overall success of a documentary. Without a doubt, the most important elements are the character and the story. That's what guides the entire film. Those are the elements that will pull the audience and make them connect to it. But then it's our job to capture and compose that story. And that's where I think the production quality plays a massive role. Because documentaries aren't just about sharing a story, but to actually immerse the audience through a specific visual language that complements the narrative. That's what makes it cinematic for me.
If you manage to connect an intriguing story or character with the quality of visuals and sound design of a movie, then you can really bring the story and the documentary to another level.
Okay, so how can we then bring the qualities of a movie to a documentary? As you can imagine, this is not the result of one specific thing. There are several elements that contribute to that. You have movement of the camera, composition, sound design, lighting, location, and editing. These are all elements that, when working together, can really elevate the quality of a film. But for me, there's one element that had a special impact in my work, and that's lighting.
Lighting is a fundamental element of a documentary. Not only it helps direct the attention of the audience to a specific thing, but most importantly, it helps set up the mood and the tone of the scene. But lighting in a documentary is not that simple. Most of the time, you can't really afford to bring lights with you. It requires time, money, and people to help you set up the scene. If there's a moment happening that you want to capture, you don't have time to set up lights in a specific way. And that's okay, because I think you should always sacrifice the quality of a shot for the story. But that doesn't mean you can't try to capture it in the best way you can at that moment. And how do we do that? We take advantage of natural light. This is the most important light when you're filming a documentary.
I think here it's very important to understand that when you're dealing with natural light, the goal is not exactly to try to use it to light every part of the scene. Instead, you should be focused on shaping and removing some of it. This might be obvious for some of you, but for me it took a while to understand this concept, and when I did, I felt like the quality of my films improved drastically.
Removing light adds depth to a scene by creating shadows and contrast, and this makes the visuals much more interesting to watch.
In case of natural light, we can't really move or control it, but we can make some decisions that will impact on how the scene is lit. The first one is to choose a specific time of the day to film. Usually, I love to film at the sunrise and sunset. For me, this is the best time of the day to shoot B-roll. The sun is low, it creates some nice shadows, beautiful flares, and adds depth to the scene. It also allows me to take advantage of one of my favorite lighting techniques, backlighting. This is when you place your subject between the camera and the light source, having the light hitting the subject from behind. And I just love using this technique.
This not only helps separate the subject from the background, but it also helps establish a variety of different moods.
But there will be certainly times where you're shooting in the middle of the day. In this case, I like to have a look around the location and see where the light comes from.
If I'm inside of a building, I always turn off the house lights and I observe how the natural light affects the scene. Usually, windows are a great source as they help soften and shape the light. Sometimes, I even go a step further and I try to shape the light by closing the curtains. And in case I'm filming outside, I look for trees or other structures that can help avoid direct sunlight and add some interesting shadows. I think the important take here is to understand that documentary cinematography depends largely on the way you decide to position your character and camera. The way you frame them in relation to light is what will have a great impact on how the scene is perceived. And you should do that in a way that it will also affect the way the story is delivered. Because nothing of this matters if it's not connected to the story. As I said before, character and the story are the elements that guide a film. A bunch of random beautiful footage means nothing in a documentary. If the footage is disconnected to the story, there's no real value in having it. What makes a documentary cinematic is when the visuals add something to the story. It's when they're showing something about the character that is not being said. It's when they completely immerse the audience into this person's life. And this is where the main challenge is. How to capture a story in a way that it's visually engaging, but not visually distracting. If the subject is talking about a tough experience of his life, maybe you'll capture a scene where there's less light, it's darker and with a heavier tone. Or on the other hand, if the subject is talking about an accomplishment, maybe you'll use the backlighting technique to portray the feeling of achievement. Or maybe you just make a completely different decision. That's up to your judgment on what you think will have the best impact in the story. For me, when I'm filming, it all comes down to two questions. What does this shot add to the story? And what is it showing that the subject is not saying? Thanks for watching.